Today I'm going to show you how to replace the muffler on your snowblower with a Tecumseh engine. Most Tecumseh snowblower engines, which are not overhead valve, have a muffler like this. There's a bolt here, which is a 3/8 head, and there's two 1/2-inch bolts here at the front. To replace the muffler, you first have to start by removing this cover here. First, we're going to start by removing the choke knob here. You can either use a flat screwdriver or pull it like this out with your hands. I'm going to use a screwdriver today. And make sure you put the screwdriver right on the shaft so that you don't break the knob. You can insert the screwdriver like this horizontally and then pry it out. Next, you're going to have to disconnect the key wire, which is this little wire here that is connected to that prong. The best way to remove this wire is with a pair of needle nose, and you can hold this plastic part as well so you don't snap it off, and just pull the wire off. Next, we're going to remove these two Phillips screws here. There's also a 5/16 bolt here. And now there's one last screw here. It's a Phillips screw, which we need to remove as well. And this is the last screw. So now the cover should come off fairly easy. You want to pull the cover back behind the choke shaft here, like that, and then she'll come off. And the wire from the key is going to come like this on the cover. There we have the cover off. The next thing we're going to do is remove the bolt here, which is a 3/8. The next thing to do now is to remove these two 1/2-inch bolts here. Before we do that, we have to tap down these bolt retainers here. Before we do that, we have to tap down the lock plate. You'll notice that they're tapped against the bolt, and that's to prevent the bolt from coming loose. So just grab a flat screwdriver, preferably an old screwdriver, and then with the hammer, just tap it out. Just enough so that it won't lock when you undo the bolt. Now that we've got this done, we're going to remove the bolts. To do that, you're going to need a ratchet with a 1/2-inch socket on it. When you remove the bolts on your muffler, make sure that if they don't want to come out, that you work them in and out. So here's an example. Let's say I could only unscrew it this far and it was jamming up, then I would retighten a bit, then loosen a bit more, and then retighten, then loosen, and repeat this process until the bolt is all the way out. Now sometimes on the older engines, the bolt, no matter how careful you are, will break in the engine. For today, these bolts seem to be coming off pretty easy. Now that you've got the bolts loosened off the engine, your muffler's just going to come off like that. I mentioned previously, on a really old engine, the bolts will break no matter how careful you are to remove them. Here's an example of bolts that have snapped right in the block. You can see that they fused right to the engine block. So in one of my next videos that I will be making, I will show you how to grind these bolts right off, to drill them out, and to re-tap the threads. Now we're going to reinstall our muffler. So we're just going to make sure both our bolts are in the muffler. Line them up with these two holes here. And you can start them by hand. Next, we'll insert this small bolt up here. We're going to leave this one loose until we've tightened up the other two bolts. You want to tighten them up evenly, not one really tight and then the other, so just go at it evenly. wad these fairly tight, but don't over tighten because you can easily strip the threads off the block. Now we'll tighten up the top bolt. The next thing we do is to bend back the locking plate. You can do this again with a screwdriver and a hammer. Just tap it like that. And also the one down here. Now we can reinstall our cover. Install it by going over the choke shaft first, where the hole is on the side, like that. Next you can insert the bolt here. Next you want to line up these two holes with a bracket in the back. You'll see some threads. Then insert your small little screws in there. Don't tighten up the bolts yet. The last bolt to put in is a small little bolt that goes right here. You can either use a 5/16 socket or a Phillips screwdriver. Now we're going to tighten this one up all the way. Now you can go ahead and tighten up the rest of the screws and the bolt up here. Now once you've tightened up all the screws in that, you want to insert the choke knob back on. You want to put the choke knob this side up and then insert that into the choke shaft here. And just push it in as far as you can. Then just try it out to make sure it's working. And it's good. The last thing to do when you replace your muffler is don't forget to reinstall this little wire that goes on that terminal. So here's an example of where these mufflers fail. Usually they fail around this area here and the insides get all loose. And then your exhaust is escaping from here. And they also just basically rot. If this is the muffler that you need for your machine, it's part number 35056 from Tecumseh. You can also get aftermarket ones.